Why is this world so messed up? If you're like me, you're kind of sick of turning on the news and seeing about the latest school shooting, or the latest genocide, or the latest war, or the latest rape, or the latest murder, or fearing that phone call that someone you know is gone. I've had that phone call. This world sucks sometimes. There's a lot of pain, and why? Why is this world like that? Well, the one word answer is sin. And sin is missing the mark. And we can go back to the Garden of Eden. Adam and Eve, there was one thing God said don't do. He said you can do anything you want, just don't do this one thing. And they decided they wanted to disobey God because they felt they knew more than Him. And that is what Satan, our enemy, still tries to do today. But that's a topic for another time. But Adam and Eve did not know more than him, because the result of that one sin is all the suffering from that time until now and till the end of the world. All the suffering that we've seen is a result of that one sin and the sins that humanity continues to commit, because now it's in our nature. Understanding sin is one of the essential elements of understanding the gospel, and we're going to talk about that too, because we're starting this few next videos on the gospel. So understanding sin is what we're talking about. Sin is the bad news. Sin is why everything sucks. Well, not everything, but a lot of things suck in our lives. The good news is the gospel. That's what the word gospel actually means. It's good news. That Jesus came to save us from our sin. A lot of times we think of sin as don't do that, or God is going to strike us with a lightning bolt if we do this or if we do that. But sin is simply missing. The word means missing the mark, missing what God has for us. Adam and Eve missed what God had for them. He had a beautiful garden for them to live in without any suffering. They missed that because of their choice to do things their way instead of God's way. I also like to think of sin as a disease, because of what Adam and Eve did, we're born into it, and it's like a cancer that eats away at us, and the ultimate result of sin is death. Sin can be compared to as crime, because we've done plenty of things. I've done plenty of things that I knew were wrong, but I did them anyway. And there's different penalties for different crimes. You get a speeding ticket, you pay a fine. You throw a rock into a window, you probably are going to jail, and so on and so forth. And the highest form of crime is eternal crime, because you've got local, state, federal crimes against humanity, genocides, and all that stuff. Different levels and different penalties. Treason is another one. Different penalties for different crimes. Well, sin is eternal crime, and it results in eternal separation from God, and that, again, is another topic. But ultimately, when it comes to sin, I hate it when my daughter does not do what I ask her to do, or tell her to do, or listen when I'm trying to explain things to her, because I know more than her. I've been around a lot longer than her, but she has this tendency to think that she knows better than me, and she gets that because she was born into sin as well. I have the tendency to think that I know more than God, and so do all of us. When God is trying to say, don't do this because it's going to hurt you, or let me tell you how to live because I created life. I know how it's supposed to be lived and what will be best for you. So sin is not something that God is trying to take away all our fun or anything like that. Sin is destructive, and it's a cancer, and that eats away and ultimately leads to death, and that's what Jesus is trying to save us from. So we have to understand that in order to understand the gospel. So next week we're going to talk about the identity of Christ. We're going to begin to understand who He is and why that's important to what He did, and we'll talk about what He did and how that applies to us. We won't get into all that next week, but that's our starting point. So we will go from there, and I will see you next week.